My name's Steve, I'm the pastor at Oldham Bethel Church, and this is my story. I was born into a Christian family. My parents always took us to church, taught us to read the Bible, taught us to say our prayers, all the sorts of things you'd imagine Christians would do. When we were children, our parents used to do what we called a quiet time with us. Each night before bed, they'd read a bit of the Bible, they'd maybe read us some Bible stories, and we'd have a little chat about it, say our prayers, then go to sleep. And there was a time when they were reading through a children's version of John Bunyan's book, The Pilgrim's Progress. And as they were reading through that story, the main character, Christian, had been walking around with a big burden on his back. He'd been trying various ways to get rid of it, but he couldn't get rid of it. And in the part of the story, he comes to a hill with a cross on the top. And as he begins looking up at the cross and walking up that hill, the ties holding that burden on his back begin to loosen, until eventually the burden just rolls off his back, down the hill and into a tomb. And I remember asking my dad about this in my bed at night. I asked him why, when Christian really didn't want this burden, was he walking around with it? And why couldn't he get rid of it any other way? Why was it only here that it would go? And my dad explained to me that the burden on his back represented Christian's sin, all the things he'd done wrong against God. And he also explained that there was no other way for that sin to be dealt with other than by trusting in what Jesus Christ did on the cross for Christian. I knew, even at that young age, that I hadn't always done what was right. I knew I hadn't always obeyed my parents like I should have done, and I remember times when I tried so hard to be good. I woke up one morning and thought, I'm going to be good today, but I never really ever got past breakfast time before I'd done something wrong and the whole thing was ruined. Even at that young age, I realised that I wasn't ever going to be able to make myself right with God. I was never going to be able to sort my sin out for myself. Instead, I needed somebody else to pay the price my sin deserved. I needed somebody else to give me what I couldn't get for myself. And I realised then that it was only what Jesus achieved on the cross that would make me right with God. It was only what Jesus did in dying for me and giving me his perfect life that I could be in right standing with God. And so that evening, I remember in my bed, I prayed a very simple prayer, just asking Jesus to forgive me for the wrong things I've done, to give me a new heart that loved him like I ought to, and to help me walk with him for the rest of my life. And that was the time where I'd say I became a Christian. I simply put my trust in what Jesus had done, and I believed that in doing that, I would one day go to heaven to be with him. I didn't know everything about the Christian faith back then, but what I did know was that if I believed in Jesus, then my sin was paid for at the cross, and I could therefore be with him in heaven forever. And since that time, I've learnt more about the Christian faith. I've grown up and become a pastor, and I've not wandered away from that. I still believe that by trusting in Jesus, by believing in his death on the cross for me, that I have been made right with God, not because I'm a good man, not because I've done great things, but because of what Jesus has done. When he died on the cross and he said, "It is finished," and when he rose again from the dead, showing that God was happy with all that he'd achieved, I believe that by trusting in that, those things are applied to my account. Jesus took my sin, had it punished in himself on the cross, and in its place he gives me his perfect righteousness, his perfect life, so that when God looks at me, one day I'll be stood before him and he will say to me, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." Not because I am the second person of the Trinity, but because I trust in Jesus and he gives me what is his, and God looks at me as though he were looking at his own son. And that is what I trust in, and that is my story.